It's Wednesday, January 28th, 2026. And if you've been anywhere near a news ticker in the last, 12 hours, you know what we have to talk about. Amazon just dropped a massive bombshell. They are cutting 16,000 corporate roles effective immediately. And we really need to be careful not to just gloss over the scale of this. This isn't just a standard yearly trim. If you zoom out just a few months to October 2025, this brings the total number to 30,000 employees. 30,000. To put that in perspective, that is the single largest workforce reduction in Amazon's entire 30-year history. It is completely unprecedented. And honestly, it's a little terrifying for the industry. But there's this massive contradiction sitting right at the center of it all. You've got the CEO in memo saying, look, this is about culture. This is about removing bureaucracy. But then I have a stack of reports that tell, well, completely different story. The financial statements and the PR statements they're living in two different realities right now. And that's the central mystery we are going to discuss today. Is this actually about culture and bloat? Or are we watching one of the world's biggest companies trade human employees for AI infrastructure? The great replacement theory, but for a corporate balance sheet. But that in that, conspiracy theory way. This isn't science fiction. This is purely financial. It is a literal swap of capital. So the mission for today is to follow that money. We're going to look at what's really happening inside Amazon and why Wall Street is actually cheering for these layoffs, which feels totally backwards. Okay, we have to start with the official story, because if I'm an investor reading the memos from Andy Jassy, he is very specific about why this is happening, and he went out of his way to say what it wasn't, right? He explicitly said, and I'm sort of paraphrasing, that the cuts are not even really AI-driven. Yeah, he is leaning so hard into this narrative of organizational bloat. Bloat seems to be the corporate word for 2026. Everybody's bloated all of a sudden. It really is. And the argument Jassy's making is actually pretty old school. He's saying Amazon simply has too many layers. They hired like crazy during the pandemic, and now they have managers managing managers. He claims it slows down decision-making, it creates drag, and it stifles innovation. So the official line is, we need to get back to a lean startup mentality, which I have to say is a little funny for a company of over $2.5 trillion. It's hard to pivot a battleship like a jet ski. But okay, let's take him at his word. He wants to cut the red tape. But I have been digging into the balance sheet and found something that suggests culture might just be a convenience story. At the exact same time they are firing 30,000 people to supposedly save money, their capital expenditure, or CapEx, have absolutely exploded, okay? How big of an explosion are we talking about? Well, in the last quarter alone, Amazon's CapEx hit $35 billion, just one quarter. In 2025, they spent $125 billion in total. And in 2026, based on what we're seeing, they are set to pass $150 billion. $150 billion. That's the GDP of a small country. That is a crazy amount of spending for a company claiming they need to tighten their belts. And to understand why this matters, we need to talk about a concept called capital rotation. This is crucial for everyone listening to get, because it basically explains the why behind all this. Okay. So think of a company spending in two big buckets. Bucket A is operating expenses, or OPEX. This pays for salaries, benefits, office rent, things like that. Bucket B is capital expenditures, or CapEx. This pays for physical stuff, things you own, like data centers, servers, hardware. Simple enough. What Amazon is doing is a massive capital rotation. They are aggressively draining the OPEX bucket by firing people to fill up the CapEx bucket. They are taking the money that used to go to payroll and moving it directly into buying AI infrastructure. So in plain English, they are firing people to buy GPUs. That's the trade. It is a direct reallocation of resources. They are betting that silicon is going to be more valuable to their future than the humans they currently employ. And here's the part that might confuse people. Usually, when a company fires 16,000 people in one go, it smells like panic. But the S&P isn't panicking. I checked this morning. Amazon is trading up. It's around 245, 246. Wall Street loves this. They don't see a company in trouble. They see a company becoming efficient. Analysts at KeyBank just raised their price target to $308. They are signaling loud and clear, we approve of you trading humans for profit margins. But I want to push back on one thing. Jassy talks about bureaucracy, managers managing managers. Is it possible that both things are true? That they do have too much bloat and they also want to buy chips? I think they're definitely linked, but maybe not in the way he implies. I mean, think about what those middle managers actually do. They oversee workflows, they generate reports, they manage schedules, and they check code. Right, the administrative layer, a glue. Now, consider what modern AI agents are getting really, really good at. So when Jassy says we have too many layers, what he might really mean is we now have software that can do the job of those layers. That's the unspoken part. The AI is the tool that makes the bureaucracy cutting possible. It's not that the managers were useless in 2022, it's that they are becoming mathematically unnecessary in 2026. An AI agent can track a development team's productivity, flag bugs, and generate a progress report faster and cheaper than a human manager ever could. So the bloat is only bloat because there's now a cheaper alternative. It's like when factories automated the assembly line. The workers weren't bloat before the robots arrived, but they sure were after. If you didn't have the AI to pick up the slack, cutting 30,000 people would cause the company to grind to a halt. The fact that they're confident it won't break suggests they have a plan to automate that oversight. And we need to be clear about who these people are, because I think there's a misconception that when Amazon does layoffs, it's warehouse workers pecking boxes. But that's not who's leaving today. The 1.5 million people in fulfillment centers, they're largely untouched by this specific wave. These cuts are hitting the corporate brain trust. We're talking Amazon Web Services, AWS, Prime Video, retail, and especially HR. HR seems to be taking a massive hit. They call it PXT internally, People Experience and Technology. And yeah, it's a little ironic to cut the People Experience team while talking about improving culture. But this is where that Project Dawn leak comes in. I know the name sounds a bit off. Let me walk you through it. Well, Project Dawn was the internal code name for this whole restructuring and rollout. An email referencing Project Dawn was sent out prematurely to a huge group of AWS employees, but they sent that before the actual meeting. Just think of getting an email that mentions organizational changes and impacted colleagues hours before the all-hands meeting is even supposed to happen. Then the meeting gets canceled because the cat is out of the bag. That sounds like the opposite of efficiency. But it also confirms this is not some spontaneous decision. This was a calculated, code-named operation. You don't give a code name to a simple budget trim. This was architectural. And it's not just in Seattle or Virginia. This is a global thing. I was reading about the impact in India, and it sounds severe. Amazon has huge tech hubs in Chennai, Bengaluru, Hyderabad. We're hearing reports that thousands of roles are at risk there, and the reaction has been intense. The IT union, NITE, has actually condemned the moves as illegal retrenchment. Illegal retrenchment. That's strong language. Their argument is that because Amazon is still making massive profit, they have no legal financial grounds to lay people off. They call it an assault on workers' livelihoods purely for margin expansion. And that's the key point. Margin expansion. In 2008, companies fired people because they were running out of cash. Amazon has plenty of cash. They're just choosing to spend it on something else. This is a wealthy company shedding its skin to transform. They aren't trying to survive. They are trying to evolve. Now, let's look at what they're transforming into. We know they're spending $150 billion. We know they're buying GPUs. But it's more specific than just buying NVIDIA chips. Right. Amazon is trying to solve a very expensive problem, the NVIDIA tax. Right now, every time Amazon wants to train a new AI model, they have to pay NVIDIA a fortune. And Amazon hates being dependent on anyone. So, they're building their own. They are pouring billions into developing their own proprietary AI chips. They're called Trainium. Trainium sounds like something a supervillain would be looking for. It does have that ring to it. But the goal is strategic independence. They want to lower the cost of training these massive AI models for their AWS customers. If they own the chip, they control the margins. And that $35 billion quarterly spend, it's mostly concrete, copper, and silicon for data centers. And we can't forget Anthropic, the AI startup. Amazon has a massive stake in them. In fact, a chunk of their recent profit on paper came from a $9.5 billion non-operating gain just from revaluing that investment. I know it's just an accounting gain, not cash in the bank, but it shows how deeply they are betting that Anthropic, powered by their own Trainium chips, will win the AI race. And this is the part investors usually hate. You can't bet the house, even if you are a trillion-dollar company. This aggressive spending has absolutely crushed their free cash flow. It's down 69% to about $14.8 billion. In any other context, that will sound like a total disaster. Usually, if a company's cash flow dropped that much, the stock would tank. But Amazon is effectively telling investors, trust us, we are going to sacrifice short-term cash flow and headcount today so that we can own the hardware layer of the next decade. So they're pivoting from the everything store to an AI infrastructure company. That is the new identity. They're an infrastructure company first. Retail is just the front end that generates the cash to build the servers. Okay, so if you're listening and you don't work at Amazon, you might be thinking, well, that sucks for them, but I'm safe. But this is where it gets worrying. Amazon isn't alone here, no. If this were just Amazon, you could call it a specific strategy. But we are seeing a sector-wide realignment. Microsoft, Google, Meta, even companies like UPS and Nike are doing similar course corrections. Over 165,000 tech jobs lost in the past year among just those peers. And the pattern is identical. Shed the pandemic hiring, flatten the management, and pivot all available capital to AI. It's not a recession, it's a realignment. There's another piece to this startup mentality Jesse keeps talking about. Return to office mandates. Amazon is now demanding 5 days a week in the office, which is stricter than almost anyone else in big tech. Most are still hybrid, maybe 3 days. A lot of people believe it's quiet firing. I mean, think about it. If you force people back 5 days a week, who's most likely to quit? People with other options, the senior engineers who can get a job anywhere, or people with long commutes, young families. It's a way to reduce headcount without paying severance. It filters for compliance. If you stay, you're bought in. So they want a small, compliant, in-person team running a massive AI infrastructure. They want a team that looks like a startup, even if the company is the size of a nation-state. So we have this massive gamble. Now, when do we find out if it's actually working? Because buying chips is easy, making money from them is hard. The next earnings report on February 5th will be crucial, and investors are going to be looking at 2 things. 1, the margins. Did firing 30,000 people actually make them more profitable? And 2, cloud revenue. Is all this spending actually bringing in new business for AWS? Because if they spend $150 billion and AWS growth is flat, then that stock price we talked about could collapse. If the AI bet doesn't pay off, they've gutted their workforce for nothing. It feels like a high-wire act. They are redesigning the airplane while flying it at supersonic speed. So let's try to summarize the big picture here. Amazon is cutting 30,000 corporate jobs not because they're broke, they have billions in income. They're doing it to fund a $150 billion gamble on AI hardware and to reshape the company. That's the reality. And while Wall Street is cheering, we have to acknowledge the human cost. These are 30,000 people, project managers, developers, who are entering a job market that is shrinking because every other tech company is doing the exact same thing. And they only have a 90-day window to find a job internally. Think about the math. If you cut 16,000 roles and freeze hiring, that internal job market it's a game of musical chairs where they took away half the chairs. That middle manager is the canary in the coal mine for AI replacement. I mean, we used to think if you learned to code or you got into management at a top-tier company, you were set, untouchable. And that is the thought I want to leave with today. We are watching a wildly profitable company replacing 10% of its corporate brain trust with infrastructure, and the market is rewarding them for it. The question isn't just about Amazon, it's about your workplace. Is your company looking at your department and calculating that same CapEx versus OpEx trade-off? If a trillion-dollar company decides that humans are the bloat and AI is the asset, is any white-collar job truly safe in 2026? Thanks for listening. Stay curious and maybe update that resume. Take care.